Hi there. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Taste with Sherry, where we're saving the earth one flavor at a time by gathering community to share wisdom around the natural connections between our innate sense of taste and flavors that are grown in healthy, regenerative soils. Welcome. Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Taste with Sherry, saving the earth one flavor at a time. Okay, so today I have one of my favorite guys here, Ron Ben Joseph, who is, my behind the scenes guy, my inspiration. He's usually the guy I'm talking to when you guys are just watching me on my own, because he's always so engaged and interested in what I have to say. And who doesn't love to have that in the audience, right? So, Ron, thank you for joining us today to talk about demonizing food.
Thank you for having me, Sherry. It's good to be back. I know I have to talk about this. So I have this demonizing, and we've talked about this before. I think I have a demonizing relationship with food. I used to say my ex-wife is very skinny. I used to say, like, when she breathes, I gain weight. Like I felt like food was just out to get me, and since then, and especially in the past year or two, I found that, like, for me, gluten free, dairy free, just helps me with my anxiety. Like, there is no anxiety. Like, it helps me just feel really calm and stable. And especially during Corona, during the pandemic, like, I really started cooking more and love my cooking. I don't know if anyone else does, but I love my cooking. And I found that, like, I still catch myself feeling like, oh, I can't have too much avocado because, oh, the fat, and oh, the this or that. Like, it's so easy for me to, or like a pizza. Oh, that's the pizza's the devil. It's so easy for me to demonize food, but I think it's not like what I've spoken to you about is not all food digests equally, right? Like, people digest food very differently. So what, like, my sister, she can digest cheese like no problem. She has other issues, other things that she can't digest, but like with her dairy, she loves it.
Yeah.
Whereas I get really depressed. Like, if I have dairy, if I have cheese or yogurt, the next day I have like this dip in my serotonin levels.
Yeah. So, first of all, the first thing I want to say about that is the biggest key is that you have that awareness, right? So, this is what's happening in our world, and it's fascinating. And, I referred to in a previous episode to back in the day when we first started finding these awarenesses of food allergies, right? Like, when I went to school, this is going to show my age a little bit, but when I went to school for lunch, part of our snack was like a little cup of peanuts and raisins. Like, peanuts were an everyday part of our lives. We all ate peanut butter and jelly, right? And I feel like peanuts became that first, like, serious allergy, right? Like, kids have had serious reactions to peanuts, right? And it started to be this big awareness, this more sweeping common thing. And then we just kind of stepped into more and more and more allergies, right? And more things that we're being told are bad for us. And this is where, like, the way I try to categorize the things that are happening to our food is what I call knowledge versus wisdom. And the basic premise of knowledge versus wisdom is knowledge is these things that we're reading, these things that we're learning, these things that we're being taught, these things that we're being marketed, these things that even just witnessing someone else being successful. So I can look at you and I could say, "Oh, you get depressed after you eat dairy? Well, gosh, I better stop. I better stop eating dairy because I'm depressed. That must be the reason." Right? So we take this outside knowledge and we turn it into some kind of, brain induced doctrine. Well, she lost 15 pounds doing paleo. I better do paleo, right? And then you do it and then you don't feel good or you're constipated, whatever, right? So this is where we need to figure out how to trust our own body's wisdom and recognize, and at the same time, use the knowledge factor to get more curious about why. What has happened not only to food, but to our own bodies? Why can't our bodies tolerate these things anymore? Why did peanuts blow up as the major first allergy? Why do we have so many circle slashes on our food right now that we're not even paying attention to flavor? Because as long as it's gluten-free and dairy-free and sugar-free and salt-free and all these things, then oh my God, now I can eat it. My brain tells me this is healthy and I can eat it. Right? Like we've gotten so disconnected from our body's wisdom. So I just want to applaud you for knowing this is what happens when I eat this. And if more people could do that for the sake of their own body's wisdom, instead of saying, oh my God, Ron Ben Joseph can't eat dairy, therefore, because he makes him depressed, and that's why I'm depressed, so I'm never eating dairy again, right? like, like this is what we do to ourselves, is we have this comparison thing, and we take this excessive outside knowledge. Now, I say that as if it's like so casual and so easy to do, but I recognize that it's not. This is not something that we're um I was going to say trained in, but that's just more knowledge. We're not given the empowerment at a young age. We're not empowered to recognize that our bodies are wise and that our taste buds are a part of that wisdom, right? So, um, the demonizing of food happens so many different ways, through so many different channels, through so much knowledge. Um, and I just want to kind of invite people again to get to the why, right? Get to the why of why aren't our bodies tolerating this anymore? What's happening to the food and what's happening to me? Because there's many loud screaming voices out there talking about what's wrong with our food system, right? And I am in alignment with a lot of it. But the big living system picture here is that it's not just what's happening to the food, because what's happening to the food is causing our own inner environments to not being able to tolerate the food, right? So the big picture is to fix the environments on both sides. And by fixing the environment of the food, in other words, how we're growing and raising our food, I believe we will fix the environments of our bodies so we can tolerate food better, right? Like it's on the soil conference that I was on yesterday, there was this fascinating Frenchman talking about back when pathogens were being discovered, and Louis Pasteur, and people that were creating the vaccines and things like that. There was a battle between the cause of illness. And one side of the scientific world was saying the cause is the virus, the cause is the pathogen, is the cause of the illness, which is kind of the mentality that we have here in America, right? Like we have to sanitize everything and get rid of the virus. But there's a whole nother school of thought that the cause is the environment. And this is what we're not talking about in general health world. This is what's missing in the whole immunity conversation around COVID. The environment of our bodies can either handle it and fight it off or can't. And that's what's kind of missing here. And when we talk about demonizing like gluten or dairy or whatever it is that we're telling everybody not to eat anymore, that's not the big picture, right? That was a really long response to your introduction.
No, but that was chock full of like solid, and like that was like wisdom. I mean, that was pure wisdom, and I get that because there's I'm thinking like, oh, like I've seen so many documentaries about vegan diets, and I don't love meat personally. I'm not like when I don't eat steaks. I don't it's not something I gravitate towards. I love veggies. I love vegan diets. Um, and or even just vegetarian diets. And like so I watch these documentaries, and it's like now even I saw one recently where Arnold Schwarzenegger, who used to be like a proponent of meat, now he's like all vegan, all this, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so compelling, right? But like I have I have diabetics, like in the diabetes in my family, like just like generational. And so I'm like, you look at what they're giving, like there's a scene where in the movie they're giving people like these like burritos and stuff. It's all processed, it's all gluten, it's all sugar. And so I'm like, well, that's gonna make my blood sugar go through the roof. So I was like, versus for me something more like paleo in that scenario, right? Like, so it's like we know a lot of people too that like uh, were vegan, vegetarian. I was vegetarian for 11 years, and my anxiety went through the roof. Right, I know, like our friend Angela, like she was vegetarian. It wasn't conducive for her body. Right, it's not one size fits all. Right,
Exactly.
either on the flip side of it. So
Yeah.
so in addition to like the way our bodies have evolved, why some people can do peanuts, some people can't. There is also just the personalized nutrition of it all.
Ah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, personalized nutrition, it's a theme in my life right now, right? We're bringing that shit in big time from this awareness possibility. And the cool thing about it, and this is where I love how, innate wisdom and science, like they're playing a game back and forth, right? Like there's this attachment that we have to the current science is another thing we really need to look at, because I love science. I talk about this all the time. Like when I stepped into college, I didn't know if I wanted to be an art major or a science major. That's how my brain works. Like I want to like understand how to creatively think, and I also really appreciate what science shows us, what shows up in science. But like what creates major resistance for me is when we take that science and we attach to it as if it's God and there's nothing else to learn. Like there's so much more to learn, right? But what's cool about the science is like things that are showing up in the form of like blood tests and being able to look at genetics and kind of understanding um, where personalized nutrition can make a big difference. Like that's cool stuff. And I don't know enough about it to be like, oh well, this is what you need to do in order to be like personalized nutrition. What I always go back to is, what is it that my body knows? And it's just like you talked about, this awareness, right? This awareness of what happens when you eat something specific and you follow it for more than just, the 30 seconds that it sits on your tongue. This is where the whole trusting your taste buds has to go beyond just your taste buds, right? It has to be like, okay, I've experienced this flavor in my mouth and it's good. My brain says it tastes good. How do I feel 30 seconds, or maybe it's 60 seconds when it gets into my stomach, and then an hour, and then a day, right? Like we have to trend the flavor connection into our body the whole time that it's in our system so that we can kind of understand. But personalized nutrition, it is huge. You're right. Like telling everybody to go vegan is not the answer. Telling everybody to eat more vegetables, I'm pretty confident that that's a good thing for anybody, no matter who you are. Um, because you're getting more bitter and everybody needs bitter. um, but I just think we're in a fascinating time in the world because we have the capability to, inspect things at the atomic levels, right? And to really understand our genes and our blood and our history and our ancestry. And there's so much that science can bring into it. But I'm looking for that to be a correlation to what my body is telling me, not to be the outside answer to what I'm supposed to be doing. Does that make sense?
100%, 100% it does. And I
Yeah.
think like, and this is my final question for you then, is like, how do we go so far? Like, what's been the journey of going so far away from actually listening to our bodies? Because you're right, like, I can listen to my body and go, you know what, it doesn't do well with dairy. I've always known that. It never did well with dairy. I can make the choice to not do that. But I respect that. Like, I can see past myself and see a bigger picture where, for a lot of people, dairy is phenomenal. Like, it's an amazing, like, my daughter, it's like really good for her. She loves it. Whereas, but then people say, oh, inflammation, it's terrible. Da, da, da. Like, no, like my kid is pretty self aware herself, and as a parent, I see like I know that if I give her sugar, like any kind of candy or whatever, there's a difference in her personality for the next 3 hours.
Right.
high and low, right? But with dairy, I don't notice any difference.
Yeah.
Like so, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a part of it. And different stages of life are going to be different too. So when I always think about when, like, especially for children, right? When we're raising our children and um I believe that the younger you are, the more you do trust your body. And then without us telling them, oh my gosh, you have to eat this much milk. Like doctors are famous for doing that with children. Drink this much milk a day, right? Well, not every kid's going to tolerate that. And, I also believe that there's stuff that gets passed down, right, from you to your children as far as what they can tolerate or whatever. But I feel like the earlier we can expose children to wide varieties of flavors and foods, and at the core, most living version of it. So I know people freak out about raw dairy, right? They're like, oh, because again, it's the fear of the pathogen versus the fear of the environment. Oh my gosh, it's not pasteurized. That could really make my kids sick. Well, what you're not really recognizing is that if it's not pasteurized and it's coming straight and it's treated, it has to be kind of treated with an awareness of how pathogens grow, so it has to be refrigerated properly and it has to do all the other things to protect you from those pathogens. But raw milk in its basic state has all of the good bacteria that gets killed during pasteurization that helps your body to digest it more easily, right? So it's this fear of pathogens. We're always afraid of the bad guys, but we don't recognize that there's good guys that help give it the whole living system picture, right? So my point is that in the younger years, I think it's the most critical time to expose your kids to lots of flavors and make sure that those flavors are coming from the natural sources so that they can learn what tastes good, what makes their body feel good, and empower them, right? I just said in the beginning of the show, we weren't given the permission to be empowered to trust this wisdom. So if we can start doing that with our kids, it's huge. But you have to be doing it from the awareness of living flavor, right? This living idea of food. Don't give your kid the cheese puffs that are like have nothing alive to support them. Give them the real food. Even when we talk about dairy, the dairy in France is not the dairy that's here. It's alive, it's full of culture, it's full of life, it's from food, from sheep and cows that have been grass fed. And not all of Europe. I mean, everybody's getting inundated with all the science of food and whatever, but um it's that reverence. It's the reverence of life from the beginning of the food chain of what you're eating, right? It's reverence to the grass, to the cows that are eating it, the reverence to the cows and the cows that are being treated, reverence to the milk when it's coming out, how you're treating the milk, reverence to the cultures that get introduced to create the cheese, right? It's not just this byproduct of processed, over pasteurized cheese that we're calling cheese here in America and thrown in plastic with a bunch of citric acid so that it doesn't mold so that you're eating it. Like, it's completely different. Completely different life, right?
And it's so funny, yeah. Like it's, I know a lot of people that same thing in the United States, dairy free, gluten free. They go to France, they go to Europe, and they're like, I can eat all the bread and cheese and not even get bloated, nothing. Like it's
Yeah,
all good.
that's me for sure. I don't have as much of a dairy concern, but gluten. I can go over there and eat bread and pasta all damn day, and I want to move there because of it, right? And wine. Wine doesn't give you a headache. It's crazy. Yeah.
Sherry, this is super cool to unpack kind of like the demonization and just go, you know what, it's not, I mean, but this is true of everything that's going on right now in the United States is that it's true for you, it's not necessarily true for others.
Right.
Like if
Yeah.
you can't handle dairy, like that's don't demonize it. It's not the end all be all. It's like it's looking at, I love that you said like looking at the environment that causes that versus
Right.
the actual thing, right? So
Right.
what things have led to it. So Sherry, I just love talking to you. You're the best. This is so helpful.
I love having you. So thank you, indulging me in such awesome conversations.
Always.